Yeah, Hank B. Marvin, welcome to Australian Musician.
Thank you very much. It's good to be along with fellow musicians.
Uh, we're talking to you because you're bringing the Hank Marvin Gypsy Jazz shows to Melbourne, 17th and 18th of May at MEMO Music Hall. When was the last time you appeared in Melbourne?
The last time we actually played was in 2015. We did a short tour of the Eastern States. Then we went to New Zealand, played the quite a few cities there with the same group, and it was good. We really enjoyed it. The MEMO was a very nice place to play. Actually, it was a lovely audience, very warm, very friendly, responsive audience. So looking forward to it. And it's a good size for this sort of music, Greg. It's not like a big rock concert or something, obviously. And it's a combination of swing music and some numbers have got a Latin feel to it. And we have two gypsy jazz acoustic guitars, double bass and accordion, wonderful accordion player. So yeah, so it's an ideal venue for us over there.
Yeah. Do you recall hearing Gypsy Jazz for the first time? Was it Django or Stefan Grappelli?
The first time I heard Django and Stefan play was I'd heard about Django purely by from someone else. So when I was 17, 1959, I think, I bought an LP of the Hot Club, the Quintet of the Hot Club of France. And I mean, whilst I thought, wow, great playing, the sound was awful. It was really thin and tinny, and I was used to the sort of new rock and roll sounds. I'd listened to big band music in New Orleans jazz. I used to play in a couple of trad jazz bands when had a banjo at the age of 15, and so I was used to the sort of swing feel. But interestingly, Greg, I subsequently learned that those first releases they recorded were recorded on substandard materials. Normally, when they recorded in those days, once the recording being used and transferred, they got rid of the original recording material. In this case, to save money, the company didn't. They over-recorded, which meant it was not as good sonically. And I've noticed on subsequent recordings, it's a much better sound. But so that was my um, first awareness of that sort of music. And how it developed, Greg, was back in 2001. I was recording an album called Guitar Player, which was this was really the concept of this came about because on previous tours I had had a lot of fans when I was doing my solo tours say I was doing a little bit of acoustic music. Why don't you do more acoustic stuff? Do an acoustic album. So I approached the record company. They said, "Yeah, okay, go for it." So I chose numbers I thought would really work, and we had I mean, obviously the normal band, your drums, keyboards, etc. But instead of being on electric, I bought my first gypsy jazz guitar, which was an old Favino, which I used on almost all of the tracks apart from two, on which I used a Taylor, which I bought in New York, a special Taylor. But at that point, I thought, hey, I better start listening to some of this gypsy jazz stuff. And I heard the Rosenberg Trio, Borelli Green, and some of the other modern players, and of course later recordings of Django with the Hot Club and with his own bands later, much better recording quality. And then I really started to appreciate the quality of the playing, the inventiveness. I mean, with Django, Greg, you had finger vibrato, string bending, octaves, big, almost like big band chord, um, punctuations and things. So it was terrific. And some of these modern players are just outstanding. They start playing when they're little kids. The guitar's bigger than they are. And by the time they get the late teens, they're technically amazing. So anyway, that's how I met your mother.
You would have been about, I think, 12 years old when Django died. Were you aware of him at that point? Was his death something you recall, or you weren't really into it at that point?
No, I didn't remember that at all, Greg. I was too young to be aware of that sort of stuff at 11 or 12 years old. And it wasn't until, as I say, what I mentioned earlier, when someone happened to me. That's the first time I heard Django's name. It was quite funny. Bruce Welch and myself were in a skiffle group in Newcastle. And the other guys in the group were all working guys, had decent jobs. We were still at school. And we just finished a gig and we're coming back from the gig on the bus. We got off and we went into the workers' cafe at the central station in Newcastle. You could get a cup of tea for like, dead cheap and some terrible fry up. And we had that. And then we're walking home carrying our guitars. And these two older guys came and said, "Hey, here, man, what you got there? Like guitars?" And we said, "Yeah, yeah, we're in a skiffle group." He said, "Hey, have you heard of Django?" No, that's right. He said, "You're Django Reinhardt." I said, and I didn't know what he meant. Django Reinhardt. It was just a weird word. And he said, "Let me show you." And he picked my guitar up. I gave him the guitar and he played this, what to us was quite a fast chromatic run. I thought, wow. He said, I said, "What is that then?" He said, "Django Reinhardt, Django Reinhardt." And then he walked off. And it took me a while to realize that it was actually a name. I thought it was one long word, Django Reinhardt, some weird phrase for music. But yeah, that's how I first heard the name.
Yeah. What about Stefan Grappelli? Did you ever meet him?
No, I didn't. I've met people who've played with them. I've met Martin Taylor a few times. And there's another British guitarist who was with them for a while. I saw them here in Perth a few years ago. Not with Stefan, he was on his own. Elridge or something. John Elridge, maybe
Yeah,
Elridge.
not sure.
Yeah, he played with them. But never met Stefan. Actually, there's a great video. Have you seen the Life in the Jazz Century video?
I haven't. I will now.
Yeah, it was done by a British guy who I know quite well. He used to be a TV producer, and he started his own little company. He did one on Julian Bream. And the first one he did was on Stefan. It's really good. Lots of great old clips and interviews with Stefan and different people. It's really good.
Yeah. So tell me about the guitars that you'll be using on stage at the MEMO.
Yeah, well, I've got probably far too big a collection now of Gypsy jazz guitars. I have uh, obviously most of them I won't be using and only use one guitar on the gig. I've got an original McAferry 1932, which I'll probably sell because I don't like playing it very much, to be honest. The guitar I'll either use a Hall, which is a German-made Gypsy guitar with the small oval hole, or an Aylwood, which is made by a British guitarist, British luthier and guitarist, actually, who makes some lovely instruments. I've had that for a while, and I've been using that for the last year or so, so I might use that. It's a toss-up between those two, but I've got some DuPonts and a couple of Fifinos and other things too. But as I said, it'd be one of those two guitars. Now they're the guitars with the small oval hole, the sound hole. Some of the other guitars I've got have got the big D hole, which is called the French call it the grande bouche, the big mouth. Um, and for any guitarist listening, they might be interested to know the difference in these guitars from, say, an American flat top or a Maton, for example, is you've got a floating bridge, like an arch top. So the strings go over the bridge and they're attached to a tailpiece, and it's the strings which hold the bridge in place. The soundboard of the guitar is very thin. It vibrates very easily. So the response is pretty good. But what you cannot do is put heavy strings on it. It will push the bridge into the soundboard. So the strings that are commonly used in those guitars are 10s to 45 or 46, or 11 to probably 40, 46. Anything heavier, and you're risking damaging the top of the instrument. Now, the other thing is the scale. They're usually around 6 and a half inches. Sorry, 26.5 inch scale. So a Strat's 25 and a half. So these will be an inch longer than a Strat usually. And I've got quite small hands, so it takes a bit of getting used to. I wish I had big hands, it'd be a lot easier, but I'm not. But they're an interesting guitar to play. Once they're set up well, they've got an interesting sound. They do vary a little, even in the same make, but there is a similarity. They tend to be slightly more toppy, and they cut through very well. And I say the response is quite fast because of the soundboard moving so easily. Um, and they always have a zero fret. The nut, then the zero fret. That just seems to be the original Selmers were like that, and everyone's just copied that. So they're an interesting guitar to play, and they seem to have this specific sound. They when you hit sort of those sort of big band punctuation chords, it really cuts through you. It's got a lot of crunch to it, whereas a flat top guitar is a little bit more subtle, shall we say, in the response, a bit more muted.
Yeah. So is it very different recording with a guitar like that than, say, a Strat?
Oh, very. Obviously with the Strat, I'm going through an amplifier, so the amplifier is mic'd up. What I've done for many years is have the amp in the live area, and I sit in the control room, so I don't have to hate wearing headphones, and you can actually hear things like you're there in a live situation that's coming through the monitors, and I can play in there, and I have my echo unit in there, and I play in there. And obviously the Strat is something I'm very used to, and I use the whammy bar a lot, which helps me get a bit more expression. You know, vibratos, dipping strings, slightly pulling up just to get quarter tones, all kind of little things like that, which you've got to do with your fingers on the Gypsy jazz guitar, but it's not always that easy because you've got a wound third string, for example. Um, with the Gypsy jazz guitars, what I normally do would in a recording, I'd probably have about three microphones up there, one slightly further away, one near the end of the neck, and one towards the end of the body. And then what we do, we blend the three microphones to trying to create what a human would hear if you're sitting in front of the guitar. And it sounds pretty good.
Yeah. And how different is your picking technique with these guitars?
Well, I've always had a crap picking technique, actually, Greg. I mean, obviously, I used to do, in fact, still do alternate picking. But since I've been playing gypsy jazz guitars, I've taken an interest in the gypsy picking style, which is quite different. They tend to have the wrists sort of curved over like this, you know, and they do a lot of downstrokes. Whereas probably with alternate pick, you'd be doing up and down. They just prefer the weight of the sound on the down picking. So what they do, for example, it's almost like sweep picking. If they play three notes on a string, like down, up, down, they'll sweep to the next string with an up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down. And obviously they do alternate picking as well. They have to, because for example, if you downstroke then an up, you've then got the next string if there's two on a string with an upstroke. So that's like alternate picking. The other thing, but the weird thing is when they come back down, they they do the same thing. So the basic rule of thumb is every time you go to a new string, you hit it with a downstroke. So if you're playing like three notes on a string, da da da, the next da 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 da, it'll be down up down down up down down up down. But the good players do it at an alarming rate of knots. It's phenomenal. I can't do it at that speed. I'm too old and too ingrained in my ways. So what I do, I kind of mix it up a little bit. I do a bit of a combination of gypsy picking, a lot of sweep picking going upwards, but coming back, I'll do a combination probably of bit of sweep if I can't, not sweep, but downstroking, but still stick in the alternate, the upstroke as well. And apparently quite a few of the other guys who are non-gypsies who play this stuff really well, they do the same thing.
Okay. Um, you're playing in Melbourne with a couple of guys, Nunzio Mondiali and Gary Taylor. How did you come across those guys?
Oh, well, it's actually Mondia, Nunzio Mondia.
Okay.
Well, Gary, I've known for a long time. He played on some of my. He used to be in a band called The Herd with Peter Frampton, and then in the UK he always had his own Radio One show he presented, and he was a session guy playing mainly bass, sometimes guitar. Um, I met Gary on and off over here. He and his writing partner at the time used to rent part of my studio in Perth, and they used to do commercials for radio. And then when I got into this music, uh, or started recording albums in Perth, I invited him to. He played bass guitar on a few albums, and also some rhythm guitar along with my son Ben. So that's how I met. And then when I got interested in in the gypsy jazz stuff, I said to Gary, do you fancy learning a few of these old numbers? And we'll just have a bit of fun. He said, yeah, great. And that's how it started with the two of us. Then now Nunzio, I'd used on quite a lot of albums on keyboards, piano, uh, keyboards, and accordion. Um, and I thought, hey, the usual combination in those gypsy jazz groups can be two guitars, bass, violin, or two guitars, bass, clarinet, two guitars, bass, accordion. So we didn't know any really good jazz violin players here. So I, I said to Nunzio, do you fancy having a bit of a session with us? He said, yeah, great. So we really got stuck into it. And then we decided that, as is our wont, instead of just jamming, let's arrange some of these numbers. So we started arranging them, and structure them. And obviously that meant our own influences were coming into play. It wasn't just a jam session any longer. It was like arranging a piece of music properly. And it developed from that, really. We did a couple of charity shows, then some people heard us and invited us to do some jazz clubs over here, which we did. And we've just done a few gigs here and there, which we really enjoy, and recorded a couple of albums.
Yeah. You'll be playing tracks from those two albums, but also some reinterpretations of some songs we're more familiar with. What's the starting point for rearranging a song?
Well, I always feel with when you've got a good tune, don't mess around with a good tune. I think it's incredibly presumptuous to assume that if there's this wonderful tune that's been around for years, for example, uh, and everyone loves it, to think that I can do better with the actual, I can change the tune. So what we usually do is start off in the arrangement thinking in terms of, okay, we'll establish the tune. Now we might do a little bit of a variation on it as part of the arrangement, but it's basically the tune. Then we go into some improvised solos, but also we work on introductions naturally. Um, Often Nunzio and I will work out parts between us where we're either playing in unison or harmony as part of an arrangement. And then we have stabs from bass and acoustic guitar. Gary plays rhythm, um, to make it a much more structured piece of music rather than just a jam session. And that's basically how we do it. We just toss ideas around, Greg, and some of them are pretty bizarre and they don't get used, and others sort of make the cut.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're a bit of a torchbearer for this music? Do you think it's in danger of disappearing if people aren't playing it?
I guess that's true of a great deal of music from the past, whatever it is. In Europe, and in the USA, a lot of really good gypsy jazz players over there. Not necessarily gypsies, just really good players. And they have these festivals, so they're keeping it alive in the States and in Europe certainly, where obviously most of the actual gypsy players, either from France, Germany, or Belgium, sorry, from Holland, and they're wonderful players, and they gig all the time, so there is an awareness of it. But we have one thing that we found rewarding, Greg, is when we've done these gigs in the past, it's quite obvious that a lot of people who come along to the show don't really know what we're going to do. There are some, yes, in the minority who follow my career and know what I'm doing, and even have bought one or two of these albums we recorded, the Gypsy Swing albums. But the majority probably don't have a clue. But the rewarding thing for us is that they love it. At the end of it, everyone's going, this is great. Why haven't we heard this before? It's wonderful. So we get a great response from the audience, which we really enjoy, and that's very rewarding. So if in any way it does sort of help people to then go and listen to the real gypsy jazz players, then I think that's a good thing. It just opens up their consciousness that, say, pop music or rock and roll is not the only kind of music in the world. There are other forms which are equally valid and can provide a great deal of enjoyment.
Yeah. Do you go through much of a warm-up routine before a show?
Yeah, usually Gary and I will just run through a few pieces, not necessarily anything we're playing. We'll just have a play for about 20 minutes, half an hour, if we can. So you're not going on absolutely cold. I always me personally, I always like to at least do a bit of a warm up, either do some basic exercises, just get everything moving before I go on. Otherwise, I feel I'm a little bit cold, really, when you go on stage.
Yeah. Just going back to the studio we were talking about before, back in the Shadows days, um,
Yeah.
were you fussy about the guitar takes, or was it more up to the producer at the time as to how many takes you should do?
Good question. That was a bit of a combination, Greg, because Nori Parmo, who was produced ourselves and Cliff, was a very clever guy. He was a very good musician, lovely string writer, and he had his own recordings that were very successful with things like the Big Ben Banjo Band and all that stuff in his orchestra. But I think I've thought about this a lot, and I think in the early days, Nori saw there was something there with Cliff and then ourselves. And with the success that we were having, he didn't know quite why, because I mean, we were pretty raw, we were pretty raw. And he didn't interfere too much in the way we routined and arranged the numbers. He might offer a little advice here and there, if there was like he thought might be, look, just try this chord there on something we hadn't written, someone else's tune. Just try that chord. We go, oh yeah, that's nice. Adds a different harmonic concept to it. So when we got to the actual recording process, in the early days, it was, I think you probably realized, Greg, what it was like in those days. I know you're not that old, but you might have read about it, where it's basically a live recording. You all play together. You get an individual sound check. The band plays together. The engineer gets a balance. Then we'd go into the control room and we'd make some comments like, oh, can we have some more bass guitar? Or my guitar sounds a bit mellow. It's not cutting through enough. They might have to replace the microphone. You just move it slightly. So we go through all that with the engineer with Nori, and then we start recording. And the red light came on. Everyone gets red light syndrome, and you're bound to make a mistake. And the funny thing was, Greg, in those days, every time if you once let's say the engineer said, "Okay, man of mystery, take one," and you get the count of 2, 3, 4. Oh, hang on, hang on, hang on. That's counted as a take. It didn't want the take. Right, take two. And so you had a few of those when it was a false start, and then we might do 3, 4, 5 takes. It just depended. Sometimes you got them done quite quickly. And and then we'd have a listen to something and I'd say, oh, we can do a better one than that. And then we listen to that and go, no, actually the one before was better. It has some kind of energy, some kind of spontaneity in it, which this one doesn't have. It's a bit too clinical. And that's the way it worked. And usually we discuss it with Nori, and generally he was pretty happy. We had the same viewpoint on how it was. And sometimes Nori would say, look, we did it again. He said, look, can I just replay you the one you did 2 takes ago? He said, I think that had a real magic about it. And we'd go back, he'd play it, and we'd say, actually, you're right, you're right. So it was a kind of a cooperative input into this sort of recording process, which we enjoy because we felt really part of it. Not that we were just there to record and we are told what to do. We felt really that we're being creative and that we were of some value, in his eyes, which was terrific.
Do you enjoy digital recording, or do you prefer the old analog days?
That's a good one. I enjoyed it all in its period. What I like about the digital recording now is that um, with things like Pro Tools, because you've got all these virtual tracks, you can do a really good take on something and it just slightly falls apart at one stage. You go, you know, and it's easy to drop in or do another take and just put them together. Whereas on tape, yes, you could eventually on multi-track do drop-ins and things, but it was always a little dicey. I remember when we were doing the songs for the Eurovision Song Contest back in 1975, I did this on the one that actually went into the contest, Let Me Be the One. On the guitar solo, I got right near the end. It didn't quite work as I wanted it to work. I said, look, let me just drop in and do that ending. It's just not good enough. So the engineer got the tape operator. In those days, by the way, Greg, in EMI, there was the actual sound engineer and a tape operator who was a trainee engineer who actually operated the tape. And he was the one who would drop you in. And he suddenly went, "Oh, I'm sorry, Hank. I'm sorry. I've gone back too far. I've dropped in." Oh, great. So I had to go back further. Then he did it again. He did it three times, and gradually he's chopping off bits of what I've already recorded. And that was really annoying. But I mean, I could replace it because I kind of on that solo, I'd worked out what I was going to do. So I know, it wasn't just like a totally improvised solo. I'd made up a solo, and I thought it's a pop song. It's got to be a structured solo, which I did. But whereas now, okay, on the digital, just no problem. You can get it back. You can't wipe it. It's there.
Yeah.
So I think it has its value, Greg, for people like me who can't do it in one take.
You don't play as much music these days as you used to. What are your interests outside of music?
No, I don't play as much music, probably. I still, uh, probably for about the past, I don't know, 20 years, I've started to practice more at home. I like to pick up a guitar and just play a little bit, try and improve my technique, things like that. Outside, I used to play a lot of tennis, which I haven't for about 13 years. Um, I have a family, obviously. Uh, I'm also one of Jehovah's Witnesses, so I have a ministry which I get involved with, which I can't at the moment because of my suffering from this virus. But and that's enjoyable, and that's a nice, peaceful, and helpful thing to do with people. So I enjoy doing that.
Yeah. Apart from these shows in Melbourne, do you have some other shows coming up at all this year?
We do later in the year, around September time. We'll do a couple of smaller gigs here in Perth at Nunzio's studio, which is also a concert venue. It's a nice little venue, and then we'll go over east. I think we're playing probably Newcastle, Sydney, Canberra, possibly the Gold Coast, um, and Brisbane at the Osmanouche Festival. And I think one down in what's the town down in the New South Wales coast? We played there before. I can't think what it's called now.
New,
Oh, God, it's quite a big place, just down the coast from.
Newcastle?
No, not New. We'll do Newcastle, but there's another one we've played before. I can't think of the name of the place now. It'll come back to me later. Too late.
Well, Hank, it's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you, and we look forward to seeing you at MEMO Music Hall on the 17th and 18th of May.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that, Greg. It's, as I say, it's a very charming little gig, and it's good atmosphere. I hope they've improved the dressing room, though. At least it was clean. Excellent. Lovely to meet you, Greg. All the best for you in the future.
Thanks, Hank. Bye-bye.
Take care. Good to
Bye-bye.
meet you.